Dr. Nadir Ali. Insulin resistance can lead to memory loss and dementia.
Insulin to be released in a pulsatile manner is important for our biology because insulin is made in the pancreas in the beta cells. It's packed into these small granules that mature and they come towards the periphery to be released into the circulation. So the insulin producing cell has to take time to make those granules. If it's releasing continuously, it'll get exhausted. So it needs a period of rest. And the maturation of the granules is timed, it is cycled to in the resting state when you're not eating to about once every 10 to 12 minutes. Let's go to the insulin receptor, the receptor at which insulin comes and sits. And when the insulin sits on the insulin receptor, it activates a series of signals inside the cell. One of the signal is that it activates a channel through which the cell takes in sugar. It activates certain chemicals inside the cell. Now let's take a brain cell. Hippocampus. Hippocampus is the area in the brain that facilitates memory. Memory is vitally important for our human function. The hippocampus is very rich in insulin receptors. So insulin sits on the hippocampus and it activates a series of chemical reactions through which it makes new protein in the neurons. And these new protein increases synaptic plasticity, which means that it improves the connection between brain cells. So insulin is important for that. Now, the receptor gets inactivated for a period of time. It gets internalized, it's doing its action. It takes time for the insulin receptor to come back up to the surface of that cell in an activated form. What are we doing as humans to mess up with our biology is that we eat several times a day. We eat a large amount of carbs. None of these things are good for our human biology if we don't recognize how the human body works. Because if you're eating frequently, you're pouring a large amount of insulin into the circulation. Insulin was designed to be released infrequently. Because when you have high insulin there at the level of the brain all the time, you're going to down-regulate the insulin receptor. The insulin receptor is going to go inside the cell and hide. And this high insulin is not going to be there to do its action. You're not going to improve memory. In fact, one of the reasons why there is such a high incidence of age-related dementia in this country is because of brain insulin resistance. You have down-regulated insulin receptors in the brain, at which time you are no longer capable of forming the kind of connections between brain cells that you lose your memory.
Insulin is released in pulses. That is critical for our biology. It's made in the pancreas, packed into small granules, and then at the periphery is released into circulation. Insulin-producing cell needs time to make the granules. If continuously releasing, it will become exhausted. When not eating, you will release granules every 10 to 12 minutes. When insulin sits on the receptor, it activates a series of signals inside the cell. It activates channel to send sugar into the cell. It activates certain chemicals inside the cell. The hippocampus the part of the brain that facilitates memory, is rich in insulin receptors. Insulin activates a series of chemical reactions that makes protein that increases synaptic plasticity. This improves the connection of our brain cells. The receptor becomes inactive for a period of time. When we eat several times a day, eat large amount of carbs, that is not good for our biology. If you are eating frequently, you are pouring lots of insulin into circulation, causing receptors to downregulate and go inside the cell and hide. This leads to brain insulin resistance, so it cannot form connections between the brain cells. This is one of the main causes of dementia. You lose your memory.